The More Homes, More Choice Act is set to increase the number of homes in Ontario by cutting the bureaucracy of it. But critics say it will create a Wild West for developers, cutting their costs, but not necessarily the costs for buyers. Joining us now for more on his Housing Supply Action Plan, Steve Clark. He is the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing and the member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes. Anything else in there?
I can add some things.
I bet you could. I bet you could. Nice to have you back in that chair.
Glad to be back.
I want to start with this community benefits charge to make sure everybody understands this. Because in the past, municipalities could charge developers for the cost of services like community centers and libraries and widening sidewalks and whatever else. Now, I gather, the new plan is to have a so-called community benefits charge. How's that going to work?
Well, it's going to work similar to a development charge. The difference is that there'll be some certainty and some predictability. So there will be a formula that will be used to develop what's in terms of a community benefits charge. And really what's been happening out there, people have been saying that this will stop libraries being built and stop community centers being built. That is certainly not the intent of what we're proposing.
Could it be the effect, though?
Well, no, here's what I hope. We are going to have a very good consultation that's going to take place this summer and into the fall. We want to hear from municipalities about the formula that we will use to actually put forward a community developing charge. And the intent, the letter I sent to the heads of council just after Bill 108 passed on June the 6th. So I sent the letter to all heads of council on June the 7th. Said it was never our government's intention to take away significant revenues from the municipal sector. We realize that growth pays for growth. We want this community benefits charge to still be able to fund those very necessary growth charges. In fact, we added some 100% recoverable charges to the community benefits charge, things like waste diversion and also ambulance charges, which was very top of mind in the municipal sector. So
who's going to pay the community development
again,
charge?
It's going to be the development industry. People that are going to want to build in those communities will have to use this formula that, again, we are going to be drafting with extensive municipal consultation. That's how it's going to move forward. But the intent was always to be able to build libraries, community centers, those soft services, but as well provide some predictability for people in the development industry. It's certainly not the Wild West. It will be a predictable system that everyone will know the rules of the game going in.
Okay, here's some feedback, and I'll get your comments on this feedback. The Mayor of Burlington, Marianne Mead Ward, says the new approach will have a devastating, that was her word, devastating impact on Burlington. Mayor of Toronto, John Tory, said it would further sour relations between his city and the province. The Mayor of Halton Hills, Rick Bonnet, says municipalities have always encouraged that new growth should be paid for by developers, not on the backs of existing taxpayers. This bill will mean new growth will pay even less of its true costs, and you, the existing taxpayer, will have to make up the difference. See, right or wrong about that?
I respect all of my municipal partners. I respect their opinion. Here's what I would like from them. I would like them to get involved in this process. The teleconference that we had today, where we had 2 teleconferences today with our municipal sector to go through the proposed consultation period. Municipalities wanted time to give us input on the community benefits charge. That's exactly what we're going to be doing. We're posting a proposal later this week in the environmental registry that will give 66 days for municipalities to comment on the community benefits charge. That takes us just past the Association of Municipalities of Ontario conference in August. So if people if some of those mayors literally want to hand me, their comments on the formula, they can literally do that at the AMO conference.
Watch what you wish for, Minister.
No, it's okay. I want them to participate. I want to hear from them. Again, we are also going to be promoting and appointing a working table, and I spoke to AMO about that last week, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. We also had conversations with the City of Toronto today as well. And it's very important that we signal to them today, and as I did on those conference calls this morning, that after we weigh in on that environmental registry posting in August, we're going to continue to have working tables that are going to talk about the formula, the proposed formula. There'll be an additional posting on the environmental registry for another 60 days. In fact, if you look at the period of consultation, it will be well over 140 days that we'll be asking those mayors to give us their comment on how the formula should work for the community benefits charge moving forward.
Okay,
so I think I'm being responsive.
All right, well, I'll get you to comment on this as well. The City of Toronto, once upon a time, put together a report called Midtown in Focus. We're here in Midtown Toronto right now. And in fact, it brought forward a lot of members of the public, a lot of experts to comment on how to develop the area that we find ourselves in right now, Eglinton Midtown. Years of work went into that. Their concern is that all of those consultations are now out the window because you have brought in new rules, a new process, a new way of doing business. Would you say all of their work has gone for naught?
No, I wouldn't say that. Our government was elected last June with a mandate. Every time I engaged a stakeholder in my portfolio as Minister of Housing, I talked about the need to provide more housing. We're in a housing supply crisis. People don't realize right now the dream of home ownership. They don't see any path to home ownership. They don't see an opportunity to live close to where they work. We brought in a number of consultative policies. We had extensive consultations for the growth plan. We had extensive consultations for Bill 108. I talked about the further consultations a few minutes ago on community benefits charge. Everything we have done, we've looked at consulting. However, we've also announced as a government we want to make significant investments in transit. Our government has announced we're going to spend $28.5 billion to upgrade transit in the city. Those two plans that were sitting at the Ministry of Municipal Affairs back in July cover about 90% of the area for transit. Our government needed to put a policy in place to maximize those investments in transit. Almost every consultation, Steve, that we had on housing talked about the need to intensify and provide higher density around major transit station areas.
Let me pick up on that.
And that's something that I think is very important. That's what my plan will do.
Okay, let me pick up on that, because Bayview and Eglinton is an intersection that's about 5 minutes east of here. Right now, 8 stories is about the limit that you can build there. Your policy would raise that to 35 stories, a lot more intensification. What's magic about 35 stories? How'd you get that?
Well, no, I think it's 20 to 35. So I think there's a range in...
As many as 35 stories.
Absolutely. But the one thing that I want to say, and it's hard in politics. I understand. I've been involved in politics on and off for decades. And when you're a local politician, it's easy to talk about the people in that neighborhood. The harder vision for local planning and local policies is to those people that don't live in that area right now, the ones who would love to live near transit, that millennial couple that wants to live close to where they work. Those are the people that I'm speaking to and trying to ensure that there's intensification, and in terms there's better density near those major transit stations.
Better density, but is it appropriate density?
I think there was something that was unanimous, that we needed to have more intensification around those major transit station areas. And if we're going to leverage those investments that we're making in transit as a government, we have to have more density. And the one thing I want to say that I have left the door open for, and I really want to work with the mayor and council. I had a great statement with the deputy mayor Anna Bilo about working together on inclusionary zoning. That's where we've, in Bill 108, have said we want to use inclusionary zoning. We want to provide more affordable housing near major transit station areas, and I really want to sit down with the city and really work together on that. I think that's something that I hope we can all agree on, that we need to have affordable housing near transit. I'm providing that opportunity. I'm keeping that tool in the toolbox of inclusionary zoning, but I'm again trying to be very consistent as a minister in saying that when we intensify, it has to be around those transit station areas. We have to leverage that investment as a province, but as well we have to have affordable housing there. Mm-hmm. So again, I hope, regardless of some of the initial feeling about my changes to OPA 405 and 406, those official plan amendments were in major portions of the city, and I think they have to reflect the new government and the new government's priorities.
Okay, this is going to need a little wind up, so get comfortable here.
Sure.
If things go according to Hoyle, there will be more development. There will be more intensification. There will be more homes. There'll be more choices for people to live. Developers, theoretically, will make more money. There are open questions about whether or not the developers will pass on the added profits in forms of, say, cheaper rents or in forms of, say, more affordable housing. There's a lot of cynicism in politics nowadays. And some people are going to say there's a quid pro quo between you allowing developers the opportunity to make more money and them making political contributions to your political party. And I think you need to speak to whether or not there's a connection there.
Yeah, I want to make it very clear that I've said right from the day that I was appointed Minister of Municipal Affairs, I want to work with all partners. If they're in the development business, so be it. If they're in the not-for-profit business and want to provide more affordable housing, I'll be their partner as well. The person that I'm standing up for is that senior who fears they can't get good resale value for their home and get into another accommodation that meets their needs, that young millennial couple. So, I reject the premise that all of our policies are only seen through one stakeholder's eyes. I have to look at every stakeholder, and I can prove to you, Steve, whether it be inclusionary zoning, wanting more affordable housing near transit, whether it's some of the decisions that I made in Bill 108 to defer development charges, or my new community benefits authority for things like Habitats for Humanity or other nonprofits, whether it's making sure that we have an environment where we can get more purpose-built rental built. We need more supply of all types. And I'm trying to ensure that every voice can be heard. The one thing that someone said to me is if you want something like missing middle, you've got to put policies in place to do that. That's exactly what I've done. And yes, there will be more developments, but these are the people that are going to be building those affordable homes for those people that I'm speaking for. So I'm not going to throw them out. I want to add them to a big tent of people who are all in the same housing space. That's why, actually, before I even announced Bill 108, I actually announced the community housing renewal strategy, because I wanted to clearly say to those people, some of the people who need affordable housing the most, that I value the fact that we have a community housing system that needs to be renewed. That's why we're putting $1 billion into that system. That's why I've signaled to the federal government that I want to be a partner. I want all three levels of government to work together to create more affordable housing opportunities. That's what constituents expect that I'm going to say, and that's what the constituents which are the same constituents of those municipal and federal politicians, they want us all working together.
Okay.
That's exactly what I want to do.
In the vast majority of Toronto neighborhoods, the only types of homes allowed are detached or semi-detached. There are a few pockets where other buildings are allowed. I think, have we got a shot of this here? 318 Clinton Street. This is in downtown Toronto. Gil Meslin's a guy who tweeted, he said, 12 units, smaller lot area than the two neighboring semi-detached houses. The key, 60% lot coverage, hashtag missing middle. And then he asks, which would do greater good for present and future generations, restricting these typologies in low-rise residential areas or allowing them? You want to answer his question?
Yeah, I think Gil always brings up a point. He's a frequent commenter on social media, and I appreciate hearing all voices. I do believe that as part of our Housing Supply Action Plan, one of the big issues was that missing middle, was that right mix of housing. And I truly believe that while we do need to have more intensification and more affordable housing through inclusionary zoning around major transit stations, I think we also have to turn our mind to other opportunities, tiny homes, laneway homes, the missing middle, that I think is such a needed area. And I think we really have to look at everything we do and trying to provide those opportunities. And I think,
does Bill 108, though, address that?
Yeah, I think it does. I think it does. There are some critics that will say the proof is, and the proof is going to be this for purpose-built rental as well and affordable housing near transit. It's going to be shovels in the ground. And I will be judged, and our government will be judged. I go in this with my eyes wide open, that I have to be able to show that I've had good advancement in the next 3 years on, now that I've put these policies in place, now trying to actually have shovels in the ground and actually be successful. So that is a big challenge.
That is the trick, though, isn't it? I mean, the fact is you're making policy here in year one of this government, but it will be years before we know whether these policies actually paid off.
And I have to use every tool that I have at my disposal to make sure that we do have shovels in the ground. We're challenging all of our partners to ensure that if there is an opportunity, that our government is engaged. And I truly mean that as well with our municipal partners. I think some of the concerns that some of those mayors earlier talked about in terms of consultation around 108, I think I've really shown that I've listened, and we've put a plan in place that will consult. I have that same comment when I spoke a couple of weeks ago at the Co-op Housing Federation conference. I literally told them that we have to make some renewal in our community housing sector. What keeps me awake at night, Steve, is the fact that in the next 10 years, we could lose up to 106,000 of those community housing units. We've got to make
because
sure.
Of what?
Well, just because people will be at the end of their mortgage agreements, they might decide that it's in their best interest to get out of the business, and I've got to leverage every single dollar, whether it's a municipal dollar, one of my own dollars, or a federal dollar, to ensure that we can not just renew and repair, but also build opportunities for community housing. So there's a lot of balls up in the air as Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. I understand that, but my signal is in everything that we're doing, we're trying to speak to that person that just doesn't see a path to home ownership right now. We've got to give them that opportunity.
Do you think the laws of supply and demand probably work in 90% of the province, but Toronto seems to be immune. You can build as much supply as you want in order to help, moderate the increases in costs, but they just seem to be going up and up. This is a very hot market, I don't have to tell you. I mean, they have 125,000 new people moving into the capital city every year. Can you grow your way out of this problem?
I think you can. I think it takes a concerted effort across government, and as I said earlier, among the three levels of government. As well, there are a number of policies, and I spoke earlier about the fact that when I first became minister, we reviewed OPA 405 and 406 here in Toronto. We started a very robust consultation, which resulted in a place to grow, the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, which encompasses a huge area that will have a significant amount of growth, not just in our province, but for our country in the next 25 years. So we have to get growth pressures right there. We have to set priorities like development around transit, but we have to continue to look at other areas of the province. One of the things that we're working on now is the provincial policy statement, and we have to engage all of our municipalities, whether they be a large urban municipality like the City of Toronto or the smallest or most rural and remote. There are housing challenges right across this province, and we need to have a flexible policy that really tries to address most of them. And it's a tough problem. I can't. I'm not gonna candy coat it. It is a very tough problem, but one that I think our government has. I have to be very pleased with my cabinet colleagues and Premier Ford. They've given me a lot of opportunity to carry housing policy.
Well, speaking of cabinet,
I'm very happy about that.
Speaking of cabinet, let's finish off on that, because this is not meant to be a gotcha question. I'm genuinely interested in how this works. There's rumors all over the place that there's about to be a cabinet shuffle at Queen's Park, and maybe you know something about it or maybe you don't. But given the seeds that you have planted in this portfolio, is it done whereby you might go to the Premier or one of the Premier's associates and say, I got a lot of, I'll use your expression, I got a lot of balls up in the air right now that I'm juggling. Can you just leave? I don't know if you're planning to shuffle me, but could you leave me alone for a while so I can get some stuff done?
Yeah, I haven't had any of those conversations with the Premier. I look at it this. I think most people know me. They know this was my dream job. I was a mayor at a very young age, became a CAO just before my election. I've been involved in municipal politics, and I think I've been in my time with the chain of office around my neck. I think we did some great things on the housing front in my municipality. I put my head down and I try to get my work done, and that's what the message I bring to the cabinet table. I'm a good questioner, but I'm also I think a very strong and vocal advocate for the municipal sector, and I'm going to continue to be that and to do that. In whatever capacity that the Premier feels that he can put me in. I'm certainly, I think most people know I'm very happy in doing what I'm doing, and I've got a lot of work to do, and I'm going to continue to do it in whatever role the Premier has. But I'm very happy as Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing.
And we're happy you came in today to take our questions. That's Steve Clark, the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and the PC member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes. Thanks, Minister.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.